those sorts of things. We did the first 2 hours of the multiplayer game, and we focused on the controls in the front end. We had 6 testers per round. I put 5 people in one room and 1 person in the second room, and I focused on that person and I sat with them and did the same sort of one-on-one feedback that we're gathering in the single-player game. Got to play 2 matches of each of 3 game modes. So we'd observe and question the one-on-one tester and get them to talk aloud. I would interview them after each mode, and all of the testers would do a survey. I actually got the guys in the group room to do written surveys, and that kind of supplemented the one-on-one feedback that I was getting from the guide who we'd sectioned off. The extended testing was quite different. It was focused on collecting balanced data over extended play. And so we're actually specifically looking at the metagame, which was the system that collected, where they gathered experience, they leveled up and they unlocked things over time. So our aim was to get them to play through the entire ranking system, unlocking all of the content. We had 10 testers per round, 5 in each room, and they would come in over a 2-week period for 6 sessions, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday night. And I'd have a few people in each room to observe and question the guys as they played. And then we get to do a survey after each level. But the main mode of feedback that I was gathering from them was I would take them one at a time out into a different room and interview them about their experiences. And I tried to do that for each person once per session that they came into play. And the reporting process that we used, the reports were made up of 3 major components. The recommendations was the first thing, so created a prioritized list of the major issues with in-depth explanations of the major problems that were coming up and recommendations for how to fix them. Then I would go through and summarize all of the feedback into issues, but also positive and negative, so the developers could see what players were enjoying about the game as well as where the issues lay. And also had supporting graphs from the metrics and the rating scales that they filled out. Got a couple of examples of actually what was in the reports. One of the multiplayer examples was players found the Big Daddy confusing. They could actually, you can actually pick up a Big Daddy suit and become the Big Daddy, like a power-up. So players were confused about who or what the Big Daddy was and how to become the Big Daddy. A lot of them didn't notice the suit and repeatedly walked past it because it looked quite similar to the other corpses. They had to get very close and look directly at the suit to get the prompt that told them to pick it up, and there was a delay before they came up. They were confused about when it would appear, how to find it and how to put it on. And some players wanted to get out of the suit, but they weren't able to. And some of the recommendations that I made based on that, and we actually addressed a bunch of these things. So to train the players on it, to train them when they walk near it, to make the suit larger and more obvious so it stands out, to increase the radius that the prompt appears when they walk past it, and to reduce the delay that the prompt pops up, and to remind them that it was available if it was in the game but no one had picked it up. One of the single player examples was the security system, which if you played Bioshock 1, it's the cameras that you walk past that alert the little security bots that come flying out. Players found the cameras hard to find, and the warning alarm was quite quiet at that time, so they didn't really hear it, and they didn't connect the security bots that were flying out with them alerting the camera and the sound that was occurring at the same time. They were confused about the timer that was ticking down, and they thought that something was going to happen after that timer ticked down, as opposed to them being safe after that time. So we addressed a bunch of these issues. Some of the recommendations that I made was increasing the warning effects, so the loudness and the brightness, increasing the warning period, and adding training, and the placement of the security cameras. Some of them were in very hard to find positions, particularly early on in the game. So some of the outcomes we had from the Bioshock user testing, we found a bunch of progression issues in the levels, so places where players got to that they just couldn't get past, they didn't know what they were supposed to do or where they were supposed to go. Confusing parts in the narrative, things that the characters said that the players didn't understand, interface issues, and specific gameplay elements that needed more training. And in the multiplayer game, found a bunch of balance issues over the extended play and particular like rorts and imbalances in the different weapons. Again, we found that systems that needed training, the players were quite confused about the ranking system. There wasn't training early on, and they didn't realize that they were actually supposed to keep playing to unlock the weapons. They were looking for pickups in the levels, and they were confused that they weren't there. Again, interface issues, and players wanted game modes. We actually addressed that by adding in additional game modes. Just a bit of a post-mortem of things that didn't go quite right, or we could have done better. I'd just like to first say the user testing greatly improved the usability and the playability of the game. Initially, we weren't going to have enough time to address the things that we found, but we've got an extension, so fortunately a lot of the findings actually went into improving the game. We could have started testing a lot earlier. We actually started most of our testing in about May this year, and the game was actually initially scheduled to ship, I think, in November or something like that. So that was pretty late in the process. We could have tested Bioshock at the start of the project. A lot of the issues that came up were actually present in the original game, so if we'd done that usability testing initially in the project, that could have been incorporated, into the development schedule. And one of the biggest issues was just our internal build process and the stability of the builds that were coming out early on. Some of the levels would crash like 5 times each, and the players would have to restart, and that kind of affects their enjoyment quite a bit. I talk briefly about an unannounced project that we're working on. We did some early stage MP development testing, and this was quite early in the process. And we're able to just play with the dev team weekly. And this was just really fun for everyone to stop and play the game and appreciate it and see the new things that had gone in. And we're also able to get them to fill out just a very few structured questions, and we really focus the testing each week and the questions each week on the new stuff or different priorities that we had. So we just weren't collecting masses and masses of data that we couldn't do anything with. So we'd analyze and report the results, we'd send that out to everybody in the team, and we actually go through, have a design meeting every week to go through the results, and the recommendations would feed directly into the iterative design process that we were using. Just quickly, on Total War, one of the biggest challenges that we had was that we had to tune a game that's hundreds of hours long. So it's sort of hard to get players to come in and play for a few hundred hours. So actually, fortunately, I had a couple of QA guys whose lucky job it was to start the campaign every day and play through it every day. And I made a lot of use of them and getting feedback from them and on the balance issues and how the game was changing and what they thought of it. We did lots of auto tests and patch it. That's just a bit of a terrible joke. We also we had a couple of sessions in Australia and in the UK where we brought in members of the community. Total War actually has a really big community that supports it. So we invited people to come in kind of as a treat, come and play the game. And we observed them, questioned them, and interviewed them on sort of the early stages of the game. We actually did some outsourcing of the usability testing. They tested the tutorial, starting a new campaign and playing a battle. And this was actually, it was great feedback, but it was one of the situations where we didn't really know about the testing until right before it was about to happen because Sega was organising it. We didn't really have much input to the process, and it was very late in the project, so even though